You're listening to the Third Down Squad podcast, the best international news podcast for the National Football League. We're your hosts, Derek, Josh, and Toby. Let's get you ready for new set downs on Sunday.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Third Down Squad podcast. As you'll notice, again, Josh is not here again. He had another event that he had to take care of at his school, but that's all right. He'll be back here soon. He's just a busy guy right now with fall coming into full swing. Real quick here before we get into our recaps, just wanted to do a quick toast with Toby and Josh. Since Josh isn't here, we'll just do it with Toby. We're all coming up on our 1 year anniversary of starting this podcast. You know, Toby and Josh and I have all kept really close, been great friends. I appreciate them every day, and just felt like today be a good day to celebrate with Toby's favorite drink, a Corona. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Not
All
sponsored,
right.
by the way, but Corona, if you want to sponsor us, go ahead.
Yeah, Corona, please hit us up. We'll do it all the time. Okay, anyway, on to our Week 5 recap here. First game, we're going to talk about the Thursday night football game between the Rams and the Seahawks. Came down to a last-minute interception to win the game for the Seahawks. Toby, your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, the last-minute interception, of course, the Seahawks defense is getting a lot better in the last couple of games, pretty much the games after the Saints game. And like I said from the beginning of the season, the Rams kind of look slow this year, not the fast-paced offense like they played last year. And, of course, they are missing a couple of guys on defense, especially with Matthew out for a couple of weeks, and they traded a couple of guys away or let a couple of guys go from the offseason. So their defense is not the same as it was last year. But we all got that game wrong. We all thought the Rams would be a better team than the Seahawks, but the Seahawks at home, they are coming together as a team. I think they're a force to be reckoned with in the NFC West.
Yeah, I think this game kind of had talked a little bit more about the Seahawks than the Rams for me. Russell Wilson, who I'm going to be mentioning here in a little bit, Russell Wilson just looks just head over heels better than any moment I've ever seen him play so far in his career. Right now, he has just been absolutely perfect. Hasn't thrown an interception yet on the year and is still throwing touchdowns. He's getting these wide receivers to work together in ways that a lot of people didn't think they would do that. There was questions whether or not he would actually be, they would actually be pretty good in the wide receiver group, and they look like they've become even better. I think the Seahawks team is definitely preparing itself to be one of the better teams in the NFL. All right, next game, the Jets versus the Eagles, where the Eagles dominated in every asset of the game, especially on defense. Shout out to the Eagles, by the way. Got me 37 points on fantasy for their defense. I appreciate you, Toby, for making me pick that one. I appreciate you so very much for that. Yeah, like I said, Eagles dominated in every way. Jets still didn't have an answer. Apparently, Sam Darnold is coming back after this week. But they didn't get to have him that week, and it obviously showed just how bad the Jets still are without him and a lot of other players. Toby, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, the one thing that we heard during the game that actually McCown got a lot of snaps during the practice with the first-team guys, and I think it hurt him during that game as they, of course, started Luke Falk in that game. So it's kind of weird for them to let another quarterback prepare for the week, and then they actually start in the game. But in the end, the Jets, either way, didn't have a chance against the Eagles, I believe. It didn't matter who played a quarterback, if it was McCown or if it was Luke Falk, like we saw on Sunday. But the Eagles, they are an okay team. They're probably in the wild card spot for the NFC this season again. But yeah, I think they looked a lot stronger against a weak Jets team than they actually are. So I'm excited to see what they can do in the coming weeks.
All right, next game, Jaguars versus the Panthers. That one was definitely a shootout, basically reaching to 70 points in that game. The offenses were rolling. Christian McCaffrey again continued his amazing stretch so far this season. And little known fact, Tobi, they said that 63% of the Panthers' offense is coming from Christian McCaffrey. That is insane. That is such a big workload. But he seems to be okay. Kyle Allen's been doing good. Jaguars, they put points on the board. They just had no answer for Kyle Allen and Christian McCaffrey in that game. Tobi, your thoughts?
Yeah, like you said, the Panthers were dominating the game. It was a lot closer than I actually expected. I thought that the Panthers would win that by a bigger margin than 7 points. But yeah, the Jags, I think they actually have a pretty good defense again. They couldn't quite show it against the Panthers. It's not the best run defense, but I think against the pass they're pretty good. So I think it wasn't quite the best showing of what the Jags can actually do against the Panthers. But yeah, like you said, Christian McCaffrey, what that guy can do on a football field, basically, if the Panthers need him, I think he could actually play quarterback as well. So the Panthers could potentially look at 100% Christian McCaffrey at some point.
Quite possibly. All right, next game, Vikings versus the Giants. Not really a whole lot to really talk about this one. What we all kind of expected, Vikings pulling off a good victory in this one. Seemed to have figured out their offense a little bit in that game, but then again, I shouldn't be surprised given they were playing the Giants. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, like you said, the Vikings are actually changing stuff up on offense again, and they started to pass the ball a little bit more often, which as a guy who has Adam Thielen on his fantasy team, I liked it a lot, especially with the target share that Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are, how they split it right now with Thielen being the clear number one wide receiver for them. I kind of expected it after the trade talks with Stephon Diggs the week before, but to be that extreme on the Adam Thielen side in that game, it quite surprised me. But yeah, I think if the Vikings can continue to play like that with a more balanced offense, I think they can do a little bit better than they did the first coming weeks with Dalvin Cook alone.
All right, next game, Falcons versus the Texans. This one being almost a 90-point game. This one have no shortage of points, no shortage of big plays. Deshaun Watson was easily the best quarterback of the week that week. He was absolutely spectacular. Any thoughts on this one, Tobi?
The only thought is that the Falcons are overrated.
Yep. Yeah, that, and I think that the Texans have started to slowly figure out their offensive line a little bit. I still don't think it's quite as good as it could be, but it's definitely a much better improvement than what they had to start this season out. All right, next one, Buccaneers versus the Saints. This one was a very interesting game for a couple of reasons. Saints ended up winning by a decent margin. You know, it was a close game throughout most of it, but Saints held it pretty much under control for most of it. One more quick thing, and I'm sure Tobi's going to mention this when we talk about the Saints game here in a minute. Mike Evans had no catches. Mike Evans had no catches. What is that? What is that? He had been targeted 2 times. How are you Tampa Bay and not target him, your best player, more than 2 times? It blows my mind. It blows my mind when I saw that. Tobi, your quick thoughts.
Yeah, like you said, Mike Evans not being targeted or not having a reception the entire game. Of course, huge shout out to Marshawn Lattimore, who basically covered him the entire game. But on the other side, 33-24 to score for the Saints at the end. It doesn't quite project the game as much as it did in the favor of the Saints. Of course, with the touchdown of Chris Godwin in garbage time, basically, it made the game closer than it actually was. But like you said, the Saints were kind of in charge of the game the entire time.
Next game, Bills versus the Titans. A very low-scoring, defensive-oriented game. Bills won that one 14-7. Like I mentioned, just not a lot of scoring, just defenses holding the offenses in place. And Tobi, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, if you told me it would come down to the defenses and the Titans only scoring 7 points in that game, I think the Titans have a lot more potential on their offensive side than putting up 7 points against the Buffalo Bills, but they just can't seem to kind of get anything going on offense and kind of take the opportunity of the potential that they have on offense.
Yeah, and I've said that multiple times about the Bills. They really don't have a lot of offense, but they don't really need it. Their defense has been so spectacular. If the Bills aren't the number one defense in the NFL right now, they're definitely a top 3 because they are just killing it right now on the defensive side, and that's why they're winning these games. And just a FYI, Josh was the only one that picked the Bills to win that game, so lucky son of a gun he is. All right, next one, Cardinals versus the Bengals. This one looked like it was going to be Bengals early in the game. Joe Mixon started off really hot, running for 60 yards on the opening drive for the Bengals. And then after that, the Cardinals just started scoring points, and the Bengals just couldn't catch up. Tobi, your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a good game out of the Cardinals late in the game. Like you said, the Bengals, it looked like they were in charge early in the game, but Kyler Murray's coming into the role of the first quarterback for the Cardinals a little bit more. But I gotta say, when I watch a Cardinals game, it just looks like a little kid running around between grown men when Kyler Murray's on the field.
Yes. He is really fast, though. It is crazy. All right, next one. What we all expected, Patriots versus the Redskins. Redskins scored the first touchdown of the game. Patriots scored 36 unanswered points after that
33.
and don't allow anything else. 33, my apologies. I thought it was 36. I guess I might have gotten that from a different number. Either way, Patriots did again what they've done all season against bad teams. Tobi, your thoughts?
I mean, what can you say about the Patriots, especially the defense this year? I think it's probably one of the best defenses that we ever had in football. If they continue to play like that, I don't see any team beating the Patriots. But it
will
can't
be interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I don't see that the Patriots defense can keep up that level of play the entire season. They have to fade away at some point.
They're going to fade away when they actually face an offense that actually can move the ball. They've been so fortunate to face nothing but terrible offenses the first 5 games of the season. All right, next one, Ravens versus the Steelers. This one came down to overtime with the Ravens showing up victorious. Crazy ending that was. But we all did pick the Ravens to win, and that was another one that we all got. Tobi, your thoughts?
Yeah, I did not expect that game to go into overtime. I saw the Ravens as a clear favorite, especially with the Steelers playing a lot of the game with the what was supposed to be their third-string quarterback at some point of the season. I think Steelers now are kind of looking back at the trade of Josh Dobbs to the Jaguars after Week 1 and wishing they could turn back time and having him back on the team. But yeah, the Ravens, man, they faded away quickly after the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, they really did. Next game, Bears versus the Raiders. This one came as a shock to all of us. Raiders pulling off the upset against the Bears, putting on 24 points against them. And, Khalil Mack did not get his revenge that day, but John Gruden definitely did. Tobi, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I expected a little bit more out of Chase Daniel for the Bears. But yeah, I mean, the Raiders right now, after the win of the Colts in week 4 and now the win against the Bears in week 5, I actually think they might be a decent team this year.
Yeah. Were you the one that mentioned they would go 0-16?
I mean, it looked like the first couple of weeks.
Oh man, I gotta give crap about that. I'll continue to do it every time the Raiders win. Yeah, and the Colts fans have been talking about it too. We saw them beat the Bears. We're like, oh, they put up 31 against us. They put up 24 against the Bears. I mean, that kind of gives us some redemption that okay, maybe the Raiders aren't as terrible on offense as we thought they were. Next game, Tobi decided to take a little note out of Josh's handbook and decided I'm going to be the one idiot that decides to pick the Broncos over the Chargers. And he gets it, the lucky son of a gun. The Broncos go off on an early 17-0 start, and the Chargers had to play catch up the whole way there. And sure enough, I mean, the Chargers could not do anything offensively. Nothing offensively at all. I don't know what else to say about it. I had freaking Phillip Rivers in that game. That made me so freaking mad. I still won that week by 70 points anyway, but so what? Tobi, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, like I said, I think the Chargers are trying to figure out what to do in their backfield with Melvin Gordon being back and Austin Eckler being one of the best running backs in the league for the first couple of weeks this season. So I think that might have brought a little bit of, yeah, I don't know how to say it, but yeah, they tried to figure it out and can't really put the stuff on defense like they would do if Melvin Gordon would have played all the games, or Melvin Gordon would never returned this early in the season. So yeah, that's the thing for the Chargers and the Broncos, of course, or not of course, but yeah, their defense is okay, or at least was for that one game. So
it's so stupid that the Chargers play the best game of probably their entire season against the Colts week 1, and now they're utter dog crap. I don't understand. But yeah, either way, we're gonna move on to America's game of the week, and that was the Packers versus the Cowboys. Again, another game where the final score really didn't depict just how dominant the Packers were in this game. Packers pretty much controlled the game for most of it. And the Packers just looked like they were overwhelming the Cowboys and just about everything up until the late in that fourth quarter when they were already up. It was either 2 or 3 scores at that point. Tobi and I picked the Packers. Josh picked the Cowboys. So there we go. That's another one that we got right and he got wrong. Tobi, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, the Packers are one of the favorites for the NFC. So I think the NFC is pretty close this year. But to put up 34 points against the Cowboys this year without Devontae Adams, your best receiver, available in that game, that's pretty impressive. And like you said, the final score of 34-24 for the Packers doesn't quite represent how dominant the Packers were in that game. And Dak Prescott, again, he's fading away quite quickly this year. And at this point, he's losing money on his new contract.
Yep, and I was just about to say that. Like, first 2 games was definitely proving his worth. And the last 2, he's losing it faster than he can put it back together. Starting to maybe think maybe Zeke is the reason he's as good as what he is. But we'll get into that another day. That's another day. Next one, the game of the week for me. The Colts beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Let's go. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. I'll get a little more into it. But of course, we all picked the Chiefs, rightfully so. We all kind of expected it. Just another one of those games that the Colts just seemed to surprise me. Tobi, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, your guy of the week is Justin Houston, for sure. With the Colts, he was the guy who kept Patrick Mahomes in check the entire game. So, I mean, like you said, nobody, and I think was there even a Colts fan out there anywhere that expected the Colts to win that game. Yeah, I mean, Colts bounced back beautifully after the loss to the Raiders and beating the Chiefs. And like I said, Justin Houston was doing the main part of it, but you're going to go in detail into the game a little bit later.
Yep. Last game, Browns versus the 49ers, where the 49ers dominated the Browns. The Browns still trying to figure out their offensive game plan, and because of their offensive flaws again, put their defense in a bad situation, especially with their defense being hurt. 49ers just had their way with them all game long. From the very moment that offense stepped on the floor, on the field, they destroyed the Browns. Toby, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I picked the Browns. I expected them to play better after what we saw the week before from the Browns. But if you saw what that offensive line did, you basically saw what an offensive line or a team looks like, where you focus on everything else other than the offensive line. And you saw it against the great defense of the 49ers. And I gotta say one thing, Nick Bosa, I love you for planting the flag on Baker Mayfield.
Yes, we love it. Buckeye fan here. I love that more than anything. I love it. Anyway, the records for this week. Toby and I finished with a record of 10-5. By the way, I was the only one that picked the 49ers to win in that game, so thank you all. I was 10-5. Toby was 10-5, and Josh finished with a record of 7-8. So that was his worst week of the year, and that now puts the records at this. I am still in the lead with 49-27-1. Toby is at 46-30-1, and Josh is now last with 45-31-1. Toby and I were talking before the podcast. He's like, finally, I passed Josh. Finally. Anyway, now that we went through the recap here, we're going to start with the Saints. We're going to talk about that first, and we'll let Toby do his, and then I'll go on my little spiel afterward. But like I mentioned earlier before, Saints pretty much dominated the game. That defense now looks really, really good through these last 2 weeks, basically holding the Cowboys to 10 points, as we saw the previous Sunday night, and then holding Mike Evans to no catches in the next game, basically taking him out of the game completely. Toby, go ahead with it.
Yeah, like you said, Marshawn Lattimore was the dominant, or like I said before, Marshawn Lattimore was the dominant guy against Mike Evans. And I think I said it already last week that the fear I have of Marshawn Lattimore is that he's playing down to the player he's playing against. So he had two strong players or wide receivers to cover the last 2 weeks in Amari Cooper and Mike Evans. So he played pretty well. So in other games with weaker wide receivers, like this week with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think he will shadow D.D. Westbrook or maybe DJ Shark. I'm not sure about who the number one receiver really is in Jacksonville right now. So I fear that Marshawn Lattimore might not bring the performance that he did the last couple of weeks. But other things in the game, of course, we had the fine of Demario Davis, the stupidest fine of the league that has ever been spoken out for a hat ban.
I've been pretty active on Twitter about that. Given that I am, a Christian guy myself, that kind of irked me on a bunch of different levels. And obviously it was a really stupid fine, which he obviously appealed and he won really easily. So of course, that's another big issue with the NFL, but go ahead.
Yeah, on the other side, on offense for the Saints, they finally unleashed Teddy Bridgewater a little bit, finally passing the 300 yards passing mark in that game. We saw a little bit more of Taysom Hill as well in that game, which I expected to be the case even sooner after Drew Brees was injured. On the other hand, Mike Thomas, he is literally the best receiver in the league right now. He has the highest reception yards in the league. He's the reception leader. The highest yardage for receptions this year, with Drew Brees only playing not quite 1.5 games. The rest of it came with Teddy Bridgewater, the backup quarterback, under center. and he's still putting up the best numbers in the league. So he deserves the contract, and he's the only guy so far that kind of showed that he deserves the money that he got with his big contract. Julio Jones is the other guy, of course, who got paid, who is kind of up and down in a lot of games this year.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Alvin Kamara, we kind of didn't expect that much of him against the Buccaneers because the Bucs have a great run defense. He had some good numbers again this week, but not the spectacular numbers that he had the past weeks. But like I said, the main part this week was Teddy Bridgewater and Michael Thomas. The one guy that I'm worried about again is Jared Cook. Like I said before the season, I'm kind of curious to see what he can do after the whole disaster with Coby Fleener a couple of years back. I wouldn't put Jared Cook quite at the Coby Fleener level yet. He had a couple of good catches in that game, but already this season he had a couple of drops where you gotta say, okay, if you're a tight end in the NFL, you gotta catch those balls. Right now, the Saints are trying to get Benjamin Watson back on their team after he was cut by the Patriots. Not quite sure if that's the best option with him being 36 years old, I believe. He's somewhere in the mid 30s of after he kind of already retired, but then came back to play for the Patriots again this year. Was suspended for 4 games, never played a snap for the Patriots this year. But the Saints are trying to get him back. I don't know why, but they gotta have their reason. The one thing that I've been talking about every week so far this year is that the Saints finally need a second wide receiver that can help them out other than Michael Thomas. Of course, there are some receptions by Alvin Kamara, but against a team like the Buccaneers, like I said, who have a good defense against running backs, even Alvin Kamara can't make up that much of short receptions. So they got to get a guy that can help Mike Thomas out a little bit. Mike Thomas can't do it all for the Saints. So, Derek, that was my Saints recap. Go on with the Colts and their big win against the Kansas City Chiefs.
All right. First thing that I want to talk about before I get into the rest of my analysis here, I want to make this disclaimer. I don't want to hear any excuse about the Kansas City Chiefs being hurt. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. The Colts did not have Darius Leonard, did not have Malik Hooker, did not have Clayton Gathers. In that first quarter, Pierre Desir and Kenny Moore are both our corners, our starting corners, were hurt in that first quarter. Not to mention, T.Y. Hilton was not at 100%, Marlon Mack was not at 100%, and we were still missing 2 of our wide receivers. So I don't want to hear anything about injuries. Both teams were very injured in that game, both of them. So it took a lot of guts to be able to go out there and continue to perform the way they did. Now, on to the actual part. It was so much more great for the Colts because last time they were in that building, their season ended. Their season ended last year in that building. And to go in and know that nobody gave them a chance. The Sunday Night Football crew all had the Chiefs. Tony Dungy said, I want to go with the Colts. I want to, but I can't. Well, Tony Dungy, you should have. You should have. You would have had bragging rights for the whole week, with your crew. But anyway, to the actual analysis of it, Jacoby Brissett had an average day. I wouldn't even say it was average. If you look at the numbers, he threw a 50% completion percentage, or a little over 50%, and had 160 yards. No touchdowns, but had one rush for a couple of rushes, but had the one rush that resulted in a touchdown on the first drive for the Colts. So obviously that came in big. He played basically the role of game manager. He played the role of game manager. He didn't do anything crazy, except for the one pick that he had, which was an obvious missed throw. There were a lot of missed throws that he had in this game, but he didn't make too many mistakes that put us in jeopardy. And not to mention, just the lack of wide receiver helps at points. But he was throwing those check downs and the easy stuff, the stuff that wasn't going to go too crazy. And one thing I'll say, the Colts loved to target Breeland in that game. I mean, Breeland was getting destroyed both in the run game and in the pass game. They made it their business to target him because he was not doing anything to help his team. And the main story of this game is the run game. My, oh my. You've run the ball for 45 times. 180 yards in this game. Marlon Mack had 29 rushes for 132 yards. I think it's safe to say, Tobi, that so far this season, Marlon Mack is making himself an argument for why he's one of the best running backs in the league right now. You look at some of the highlights of some of the runs he had. Wow. I mean, he's looking more and more like Le'Veon Bell. He's just becoming so much more patient, and his jump cuts and his agility is just off the roof from where it was a year ago. I mean, it's crazy to think, and this offensive line has just gotten better and better. I thought they couldn't get better from last year. They look better now. They can run the football. That is what will help this team later on down the road. They can run the football better than almost any team in the NFL right now. I mean, Quentin Nelson and Anthony Costanzo are ranked the number 1 left tackle and the number 1 left guard in the NFL right now. Ryan Kelly is in the top 5 in centers. And then the right guard and the right tackle, they're doing their job pretty much as well. I mean, I can't give enough credit to what this offensive line's been able to do. They exploited the Chiefs in the way that other teams didn't. The Detroit Lions tried to do it, and they did pretty good at it, but their defense wasn't good enough to stop Mahomes later on down the road, which is what the Colts did. They were able to run the ball on offense more effectively and just tire the Chiefs out. And that was the easiest way to win the game on offense. And with this defense, I understand that when you have multiple offensive linemen out for the Chiefs, that definitely makes it difficult to hold this Colts defense, any defensive line for that matter. But the Colts definitely dialed up the pressure. Do you know that in that game, the Colts brought 5 men or more than 41% of the time during that game against the Chiefs? They absolutely needed to do that, and they knew if they could keep Patrick Mahomes in the pocket, especially since, you know, that shin was messing with him in that game as well. If they could keep him in the pocket and they could get pressure, and they started playing man. If you watch the game, the first 2 drives, they played zone, and Patrick Mahomes carved them up with the zone. And then they switched to man. They switched to man and started dialing up blitzes. And then it started getting to Mahomes more and more and more. And then they couldn't run the ball. The Chiefs had 40 yards rushing in that game. And Mahomes just couldn't do it all by himself, especially with Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins not being in there. And Travis Kelce, dude, did really well in the first 2 drives. And then the rest of the game had 1 catch. 1 catch. And we had Quincy Wilson, who the week before, many people were questioning whether or not he's going to be on this roster by the end of the year. Comes in, plays against Travis Kelce man-to-man all game long, and held him to 1 catch after the first 2 drives. That was a remarkable performance by this defense and great adjustments by Eberflus to understand that Mahomes was carving up the zone and you had to fix something. You had to change it. You couldn't just keep doing zone because Mahomes was going to pick it apart. You start playing man because they started losing speed because they didn't have Tyreek or Sammy Watkins. You lose speed, you have the advantage. You can make man. You can dial up blitzes. And the Colts had 4 sacks in that game. For the previous 2 weeks before that, they had 2 sacks the last 2 weeks and had 4 in that game against Kansas City. Like I said, it's just, I know it was a game where both teams were not at their fullest, but it was a game where it was a make or break for the Colts to really feel like they could achieve something before this bye week that they have this week. And to go into the bye week knowing you just upset the Chiefs at Arrowhead. I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, it was a phenomenal game. I will go on record saying that I did not give us much of a chance, any chance at all to win this game, although I was optimistic. I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be happier at this moment. The only one that'll make me happier at this point is when we beat the Saints in December. It's the only one that will make me feel better. And you laugh now. Just wait. Okay, just wait. But anyway, you heard me rant enough already as is. Now we're gonna get into our actual topics. And obviously, the first one we're going to get into is the one that everyone's been talking about, and that is Jay Gruden being fired. The Washington Redskins finally fired Jay Gruden after multiple different reports coming out that, Jay Gruden didn't want Haskins to begin with, and they started talking about how, he didn't have great relationships with the players and all this other stuff going on here. Tobi, we'll let you start with this one. What's the next step for the Redskins here? And was this actually a good move, or does this just put them with more questions than answers?
Yeah, for this season for sure, they have a lot of questions to answer to begin with, and now with a new head coach or an interim head coach, it just adds to all the confusion that is on that team. Of course, they're missing Darius Geis once again with injury, which would make their situation slightly better, I think, with a better running game. But, I mean, their worst problem right now is their offensive line. But I think it was a good move to finally get rid of Jay Gruden, because the Redskins were never that great of a team all that years that Jay Gruden was in Washington, besides that 1 year that they had Kirk Cousins really showing off what might be in him, but I'm not quite sure if that was really Jay Gruden's, I'd say, fault, but if he was responsible for it. So I think a new head coach in Washington might help them, especially with one of the earlier picks in the drafts for sure. Next year, of course, after this week, we probably know who's going to get the first overall pick between the Washington Redskins and the Miami Dolphins. They're the two teams that it's basically between who's going to get the first pick next year, and probably Tua. So I'm not sure if it's... I think if it was Jay Gruden still head coach and he had the first overall draft pick, like you said, there were reports out there that he never really wanted Dwayne Haskins on the team. I think they might have actually gone with Tua to begin with the first overall pick next year, and moved on from Dwayne Haskins after 1 year. If Jay Gruden was still there, he of course is not. So I think Dwayne Haskins might have a chance to stay longer in Washington, but if he's playing like he does right now, of course, it's not his fault, but we saw what happened to Josh Rosen in Arizona last year, and he's now with the Dolphins. So I think that might be the fate of Dwayne Haskins in Washington as well, even without Jay Gruden. And the next question, of course, for Washington is who's going to be the next head coach, and I can't think of anybody that can really refurbish the Washington Redskins right now.
I would love to see Rex Ryan do it. I'd love to see Rex Ryan do it. I think he joked about it. I think he joked about it Monday night, but I would love to see that. Anyway, I mean, it's funny because we have the Redskins versus the Dolphins this week. That might be one of those two teams' only win this year, might determine who gets the number one pick. They might honestly both try to lose this game. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, this was it a good move? Yeah. I mean, most people said, well, what does firing Jay Gruden in the middle of the season accomplish? What does that do? I mean, what does it accomplish keeping him around? What does it accomplish that? There's nothing to accomplish. This season's over. This season's over before it even began. There's nothing that the Redskins can do at this moment that makes it any better. Whether they kept him or they left him, it doesn't matter. It was still a good move because now you can focus on what you want to do from this point forward. what you want to do with your culture, what you want to do with your scheming with a possible new head coach. But I will say this: I don't think that Jay Gruden was the real problem in this whole organization. I think it has more to do with the owner itself. I think ownership has been over the last 20 years has been the much worse component to why this team's not succeeding than it is with Jay Gruden, because Gruden's only there to coach. Gruden, you can say what you want about him, but if the ownership is picking players that he doesn't want on his team, if ownership is talking down to these players and treating them like they're just a sack of potatoes that they can replace with anyone else. We've kind of heard him say that about Kirk Cousins and about a couple other guys as well. I don't really think he was the biggest issue here, but obviously we can't fire the owner and we can't fire a GM. We can't really do that, but only the owner can do that. But in regards to the move itself, yeah, I think it was a good move to start planning on, future things. I can see why Jay Gruden didn't really want Dwayne Haskins at first. Everybody's kind of mentioned the fact that, Dwayne Haskins played 1 year at Ohio State. I mean, he's still got some learning to figure out. I mean, he was phenomenal in college. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he was head over heels the best quarterback that year, but I mean, when you're 1 year in college, there's two or three other years you could have used to learn the sharpness element of it all. And I think he's still figuring it out. And like you mentioned, the Redskins offense and defense is so bad at this point. It's not like putting him in there at this point is going to help anyway. So it wouldn't help him anyway, because I mean, you're going to have a terrible team. He's not going to learn on the fly while trying not to get killed at the same time. All right, we're going to shift from Jay Gruden to Baker Mayfield. And Mayfield's been on the headlines for a lot of reasons this last week. Richard Sherman made up that Baker Mayfield didn't shake his hand. And, of course, Sherman kind of alluded from that. But, that's for another day. You can see the clip. I'm sure everybody's seen the clip. Everybody knows Richard Sherman was lying. It's fine. And then we obviously saw, like Tobi mentioned, how Nick Bosa planted the flag on him. That's fine. I think the biggest thing we've been wanting to talk about, Tobi, is there was so much good charisma coming around him this year. Everyone said, oh, he's a top 10 quarterback already. Look at what he's been able to do. Well, so far this season, he hasn't even looked better than Jacoby Brissett. And Jacoby Brissett's been an average quarterback this year. And I think that it's hurting this Browns team in more ways than one. Obviously, this Browns team has a lot of issues that it still needs to fix, from the head coaching all the way down to the players performing. But, I mean, what do you think? Is he regressing the way that we think he is? And is this season, is it time to panic if you're a Browns fan right now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say Baker Mayfield is regressing. He wasn't really that top guy anyways in the league. Of course, he had great moments last year when he came into the league, but you got to see that the Browns had a lot better offensive line last year than they do this year. So I think a lot of his problems come from a decrease in performance from the offensive line and his protection, so he's getting hurried a lot more than he did last year. He has to throw a lot more on the run. So that really impacts his performance this year. The other thing that you said is the change in the coaching staff. So I think that last year, the entire way that the team was coached after Greg Williams took over as interim head coach, it kind of fitted Baker Mayfield a lot more than it does right now. And he kind of wants to be the star of the team. And with Odell Beckham Jr. kind of taken away from his place in the team and being the leader of the team, or the star of the team, I think it kind of hurts his It doesn't show it, of course, but I think it hurts his ego a little bit, and it shows on the field. And yeah, you had a couple of games this year, a couple of scenes this year where you can actually see Baker Mayfield when he's protected and has a little bit more time in the pocket like he had last year. He can still be a pretty good quarterback. He is not a top 10 quarterback. He's not going to play at a level like say Russell Wilson, to compare in height and kind of play style of the two. But yeah, on the question if Browns fans should panic right now, well, I'd say when you're a Browns fan, you're used to this. You're actually happy that they have won games this year, or actually came close in a couple of them. After seeing the two games against Tennessee and the 49ers, yeah, you might panic about what the team is actually doing, if they made the right moves this offseason. But like I said, there were a couple of plays in there that should inspire hope into Browns fans as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know really what to really say whether or not you should panic or not. I mean, I guess if you're a Browns fan that assumed you were automatically going to the Super Bowl, then yes, it's time to panic. But I'm indifferent. I don't think it's time to panic about Baker Mayfield. I don't necessarily think that. I mean, we saw what happened with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott had an amazing first year, and then he regressed his second year. I mean, it almost happens every time with a rookie quarterback. It almost always happens. The first year, the rookie quarterback does amazing, and then the next year, you expect them to elevate it even higher. But in reality, they kind of take that little bit of a slope sometimes, that little bit of downward slope. I still think Baker Mayfield's good, and I think the Browns have the talent to figure it out. It's just right now, there might be some players on that side, on that offensive side, that don't really fit and don't really belong. And I think also Freddie Kitchens is a lot to blame here. It's Freddie Kitchens' fault and the offensive line's fault for why this offense isn't running the way it is. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is. And to be honest, I mean, everybody keeps looking at OBJ and everyone's like, well, he's not getting receptions. His targets have been dropping every week so throughout the year. And I think the Browns are starting to realize they need to run the ball more, because in the games that Nick Chubb goes off, they're winning these games easily. And when Chubb isn't getting involved, then they just get blown out. I mean, again, there's just so many more questions that still need to be answered. I don't know whether or not I just don't really know what to expect. I really don't know. There's Freddie Kitchens isn't performing well. OBJ isn't doing his job very well. Baker Mayfield isn't doing his job well. The offensive line is not doing their job well. And the defense being hurt almost all the time the last 3 weeks certainly doesn't help things either. All right, last one before we get into Tobi's odds. Our pick to win the MVP of the 2019-2020 season. Still a lot to go. A lot of things can change from this time, but we're starting to get a nice little sample size of who is up there right now. I'll start with this one here, and then I'll let Tobi go last here. My MVP right now has to be Russell Wilson. It has to be Russell Wilson, because there were so many questions about Seattle and what were they going to be able to do on offense. Was Russell going to be able to handle the offensive line not being great? Was he going to be able to handle, losing Doug Baldwin and a couple of other guys, relying on Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, who a lot of people didn't know how good he would actually be. Like I said in the preview, he's looked flawless I mean, he's looked amazing. I mean, I can't pick a spot in his game that he's not performing at an elite level right now. He looks like the best quarterback in the NFL at the moment. I know people want to mention Patrick Mahomes. I get that, but Patrick Mahomes has dropped a little bit over the last couple weeks. Russell Wilson hasn't dropped. Russell Wilson's been elite from first snap to now. And that Rams game he had 4 touchdowns. I mean, he almost threw for a perfect game. I mean, that man just looks to me like he's been hearing all the talk and he's trying to show you all why he was paid, why he deserved the money that he got. And right now he's showing it. And that's why ultimately Russell Wilson is my MVP through the first 5 weeks of this season. Tobi, who's your MVP through the first 5 games?
Yeah, I can see your points for Russell Wilson, but I think there are a couple too many close games in there this year for Russell Wilson to be up there for me for MVP. And for me, it's a guy off another 4-1 team so far this year, and I am just picking him because he's not in the conversation for MVP at all so far as I've read in sports media for now. And I'm not fanboying right now. I'm wearing his jersey, and I think he's the reason the Saints went 3-0 without Drew Brees, and that's Michael Thomas. He is the one guy on the team that is producing week after week for them. He is the leader in reception yards. Like I said before, he was the most productive guy against the Buccaneers. He was one of the main reasons the Saints were great against the Cowboys. Of course, Alvin Kamara is there as well, but he is the only receiver that the Saints have right now on their team. So for me, with how he can perform even with the backup quarterback on the field, of course, Teddy Bridgewater is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, but still, how he can still be up there in reception yards and lead the team to victories without first ballot Hall of Famer for sure. He has to be in the conversation for MVP right now, so I want to mention his name right here, and he is so far my pick for MVP.
We're just out of curiosity, since we mentioned this guy before the podcast. Where would you put Christian McCaffrey right now if we were talking MVP? I put him at my second or third right now.
Yeah, for me, he is right behind Michael Thomas, and number 2 and number 3 would be probably Patrick Mahomes still.
Gotcha. Yeah. I agree as well. All right, Tobi, your segments. Go ahead.
All right, we're coming back to Tobi's odds.
Tobi's odds.
All right, so the first game this week's or for this week's picks. Sorry, can't speak English today. But first game is between the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The game in London this week. The Carolina Panthers are a 2.5 point favorite this week at the odds of -110. I'm going to go with the favorite here. Carolina, I think, is going to put up a lot of points against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I believe that despite the fact, like I said before, the Buccaneers have an elite run defense, I think Christian McCaffrey might be able to break out against, or might be the one guy to be good against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers rush defense. Alvin Kamara put up around 100 scrimmage yards from scrimmage last week against the Bucs, so I believe Christian McCaffrey can do a little bit more against them. With Kyle Allen on the center, they might actually have a good passing attack as well. Their defense, I think, can kind of stop the Buccaneers like the Saints did last week. So I think the Carolina Panthers win it by at least a field goal. The next game up is between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are the 11-point favorite in that game at the odds of -105. I'm going to go with the favorite here as well. I know I said before in our weekly recap that the Baltimore Ravens have declined over the last couple of weeks, But with how the Cincinnati Bengals played so far this season, I don't see why the Baltimore Ravens shouldn't put up more, or should win that game with less than 11 points. Especially, I think Mark Ingram might be a good weapon against Cincinnati with the run there, because I don't think Cincinnati is not the best defense against the run right now, especially against a running back with the style of Mark Ingram. Next game is between the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are the 4-point favorite in this game at the odds of -110. I'm going to go with the favorite here once again. The Kansas City Chiefs, I think, will rebound from the loss last week against the Colts. The Texans have shown that they can't put up a lot of points against the Falcons last week. I think Kansas City is just on another level than the Falcons are, and I think with Kansas City and their pass rush right now, I think they might be able to take advantage of a still struggling offensive line for the Houston Texans. Derek said before, they are getting better, but I think Kansas City might be a little bit too much still for Houston, and I think Patrick Mahomes wants to show that he is the MVP still this year, so he wants to bounce back from last week against Houston. The fourth game this week is between the New Orleans Saints and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars are the favorites by 1.5 points this week at home with the odds of -110. If I'm picking the spread, I'm going to go with the Saints at +1.5. Same odds here, -110. I actually think that you might be able to pick the Saints outright this game. Yeah, the Jags have a better defense than a lot of teams that the Saints faced so far with Teddy Bridgewater under center. I'm not sure what the status of Jalen Ramsey is right now, if he might be back to play for Jacksonville again against the Saints, or if he finds another reason to not play once again. But I still think that the Saints are a better team than the Jags right now, and I think that the spread with the Jags as a favorite this week is just wrong. The last game is between the San Francisco 49ers and the LA Rams. The LA Rams are the favorite by 3 points with the odds of -120. I'm going with the Rams here as the favorites. I know I said I said it a lot this year that the Rams are a slower team than they were last year. And of course, they're playing an undefeated team in the San Francisco 49ers at being 4-0. They are coming into the Rams Stadium, into the Coliseum. But when you look at the schedule so far for the San Francisco 49ers, they never really faced a good team so far this season. So their first real test is against the LA Rams this week, and I think the Rams are still a better team than the San Francisco 49ers are. So I think the Rams should show us how good the 49ers actually are, and I think that the LA Rams are better than them, and they will beat them by more than 3 points. So those are my odds for this week. Got a recap for you. The Carolina Panthers with a -2.5 points with the odds of -110. Baltimore against Cincinnati with -11 points with the odds of -105. Kansas City with -4 points against Houston with the odds of -110. New Orleans Saints against the Jacksonville Jaguars with +1.5, or maybe even outright, but with the spread at -110 odds. And the LA Rams against the San Francisco 49ers with -3 points and the odds of -120. And if you hear this episode before the Thursday night game, I still think that the New England Patriots will cover the spread of -17 points against the the New York Giants tonight without Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, and Sterling Shepard out there. So if you're one of the early ones listening to the podcasts, you get an extra one this week. But right now we're moving on to our weekly predictions. And the first game up, like I said, Thursday Night Football is between the New England Patriots and the New York Giants. So, Derek, go ahead. You got Josh's predictions as well. Tell us what you two picked for this week.
Patriots. Simple as that. When you have your three best players not playing, you can't win.
Yeah, like I said in my odds, I'm gonna take them as well. The first game on Sunday, it's gonna be an early game at 9:30 a.m. coming to you from London between the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Derek?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that the spread's so close. I mean, I know Tampa Bay's looked pretty good. I guess they're taking what you said, that the Buccaneers have had a decent rush defense so far this year, but I mean, the Panthers defense is legit. Panthers defense is really good. And Kyle Allen has added a new concept to the Panthers offense that they haven't had with Cam Newton for a while. So I think Josh and I both agree here. The Panthers are the better option right now.
Yeah, I already said it in my odds segment as well. I'm going to go with the Panthers here. For me, it kind of depends on how much Christian McCaffrey can do against the run defense of the Buccaneers. But I believe he is the one guy that can break the run defense of the Buccaneers. Then we go on to the afternoon games, and the first game is going to be the Tank Bowl between the Washington Redskins and the Miami Dolphins. Derek, tell us what you got.
This is so sad that I'm having to pick between two teams that haven't even won a game yet. Just for the sake that the Dolphins have been able to put points on the board versus the Redskins, I'm going with the Miami Dolphins, and so is Josh.
All right, I'm actually going with the team that I think wants to lose more, and for me, that's the Miami Dolphins. So I'm gonna go with the Redskins winning this one, just because out of the Miami Dolphins just wanting to lose and get to with the first pick next year.
I swear, if you win because of that bull crap, I will be so mad. I'll be so mad.
Moving on to the fourth game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. Derek, go ahead.
This is where Josh and I had our one disagreement. And I think I know what direction you're going to. But I'm going to go the opposite because I think I know what direction you're going to. I am going with the Philadelphia Eagles in this game. I believe that their defense is slightly improved. I think that they're going to be able to slow down the Vikings a little bit on offense. And I think the Eagles hopefully don't have the case of the dropsies like they have in the last few games. And the Eagles will pull this one out in a close one. And Josh has picked the Vikings for this one. I'm probably assuming because it's home.
Yeah, I'm also going with the Vikings here in this game. Like you said, one of the reasons is they're at home, and I hope they keep playing like they did last week. I think if they keep passing the ball as well as they did last week, or at least as often, to give their wide receivers at least a couple of opportunities, I think they can still beat the Eagles. It's a close one, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Vikings here. And the next game, I've already given my prediction here as well, between the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. With my reasoning in my odds segment, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Derek, who you got?
I originally wanted to go with the Texans on this one. I thought, they would try to exploit what the Colts did against the Chiefs, but then I realized, oh yeah, they don't have an offensive line to be able to run the way the Colts do. Yeah, like you mentioned also how I think the Chiefs are going to come back at home and remind people just how good they are. I think they got punched in the mouth, and they're going to want to show that they're going to get back up and be fine. I think Josh said pretty much the same thing because him and I are both picking the Chiefs on this one.
All right, moving on to the next game. I've already given my prediction here as well between the New Orleans Saints and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, I'm going with the Saints here. So, Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking the Saints here as well. The Saints defense has just been phenomenal over the last 2 weeks. And I think even if Jacksonville can score a few points, I think that just like you mentioned, Teddy Bridgewater has finally been let loose a little bit. They're opening up the playbook for him more and more as the weeks go along. And like you mentioned, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara, those dudes are just studs. And as good as this Jaguars defense can be, especially their front, I just don't know if they're going to get a lot of pressure on Bridgewater. And I think Sean Payton has strategies to be able to adjust to that. We kind of saw that in the Seattle game. I think they'd probably just do the same thing if that happens. And Josh is agreeing with me here as well. We're all going with the Saints.
All right, we're moving on to the Seattle Seahawks against the Cleveland Browns. And since your MVP pick was Russell Wilson, Derek, give us your pick.
I think you already know where I'm going with this one. I'm giving it to the Seahawks here. Even if they're on the road, I just with the way the Browns are right now, just in shambles, especially on that defense, I just think the Seattle Seahawks are just the more sound football team right now. And ultimately, that's why I think they're going to win this game. And shockingly, Josh agrees with me also. He's going with the Seahawks as well.
I think that's the first game Josh hasn't picked the Browns this season.
Is it really? Oh, it's funny.
But yeah, I'm also going with the Seahawks. Like I said, the Browns are struggling with their offensive line right now, and that's the thing that the Seahawks can't exploit right now. So I expect Baker Mayfield to run around a lot or actually be on the ground for a majority of the game. The next game, once again, I've given my prediction already in my odds segment, is between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going with the Ravens here. So, Derek, give us the two picks that you got.
Yeah, Josh and I are agreeing here. Ravens, Bengals look like they're in contention to be the worst team in the NFL this year. So, and two more things before we keep going. I have $14 put down on the Patriots. If they don't win tonight, I'm going to be upset. It'll be the worst upset of the entire year, even though I'm pretty positive that won't happen. The Patriots have a 93% chance to win on ESPN. But anyway, the Redskins pick also, you mentioned how, you're trying to pick which team is trying to lose the worst. I hope they do, in a sense, because the more they lose, the more that helps that Colts second-round draft pick that they got this year. They're probably going to get the number 1 second-round draft pick, which I think Ballard might use to get somebody this year. But anyway, we're all picking the Ravens here.
All right, we're moving on to the 4 o'clock games. First game, the last game that I've already predicted between the 49ers and the LA Rams. I'm, of course, going with the LA Rams here, and Derek, go ahead.
This one was very tough for me because both of these teams are very explosive on offense, even with the Rams not being as dynamic as they were last year. They're still putting up points at a good number. And it is even tougher for me given the fact that the 49ers don't have either one of their starting tackles to start this game. But then again, they did pretty good against that defensive front from the Browns as well. I like Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a genius, just like Sean McVay is. This is very difficult for me, but I'm going with the undefeated team because I think they have that fire in them right now. And Josh is agreeing with me as well. We're both picking the 49ers.
All right, we're moving on to the Atlanta Falcons against the Arizona Cardinals. Derek,
go first.
All right, I'm going first. Like I said in my weekly recap, the Cardinals are getting better and better each week, especially Kyler Murray's getting a little bit more comfortable at least. but I still think the Falcons. I think Julio Jones might have one of his big games against the Cardinals this week. So it's kind of a gut feeling for me, but I think it's close, but I'm going with the Falcons here.
All right. You might be surprised. Josh and I are agreeing with you. I think with the Cardinals, David Johnson may not play in this game. He has a back injury that's messing with him. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you have a running back on fantasy and you don't trade me something, I will be mad at you. Anyway, yeah, even if yeah, and by the way,